Okay, picture this. It's your birthday. The lights dim, your friends wheeling the cake, and it's the size of a small car, absolutely covered in candles. 900 candles. Just trying to light them would take a week. And blowing them out? Forget it. You'd need hurricane-force lungs. Sounds ridiculous, right? Like something out of a fantasy novel? Well, buckle up, history detective, because according to the opening chapters of the Bible, the book of Genesis, this wasn't fantasy. This was Tuesday for guys like Methuselah. We're talking lifetimes that make modern centenarians look like spring chickens. Seriously, Methuselah clocked in at a staggering 969 years. Adam, 930. Noah, a cool 950 before he even built his famous boat. So, the million-dollar question? Or maybe the 900-year question is, how did they do it? Were they superhuman? Was the world just different? Or is there something we're totally missing in the translation? Get ready, because we're diving deep into one of the Bible's biggest head-scratchers. Welcome back, time travelers. I'm your guide to the wonderfully weird world of ancient lifespans. Let's get one thing straight up front. We're not here to preach, and we're definitely not here to bore you with dusty academic lectures. We're here to explore, to wonder, and yeah, maybe chuckle a little at how utterly bonkers this sounds to our modern ears. Imagine trying to explain the concept of Wi-Fi to Methuselah. So, Meth, you just connect invisibly to this global network? He'd probably check you for fever. Chuckle. But Genesis presents these ages matter-of-factly, so we gotta take the mystery seriously, even if we approach it with a playful spirit. Ready to crack this ancient code? All right, folks, time for our first Bible fact break. Let's meet the all-star lineup of Genesis longevity. Taking the undisputed championship belt, Methuselah, 969 years. Give it up! In the silver medal position, Jared, a respectable 962 years. And rounding out the podium, good old Noah, surviving floods and ark building for 950 years. But wait, there's more. Adam, 930. Seth, 912. Kenan, 910. Enosh, 905. Mahalalel, 895. Lamech, Noah's dad, 777, a lucky number but short by their standards. And Enoch, 365, who didn't die but walked with God and was taken. Notice something? These crazy long lifespans aren't random. They cluster right at the beginning, from creation up until, well, we'll get to that until part. It's a trend, but why? And then something happens. After the flood, lifespans start dropping faster than a smartphone in a bathtub. Shem? 600 years. Still impressive, but less epic saga, more really long biography. Abraham? Down to 175. Moses? 120. By the time of King David, 70-80 years is considered the norm. That's a massive shift. So whatever enabled those pre-flood Methuselah years seems to have changed dramatically. The plot thickens. All right, detectives, theory time. First up, and perhaps the most straightforward, the literal word approach. This theory takes Genesis at face value. The text says they lived that long, so they did live that long. Simple as that. Supporters point to Genesis itself for the how. 1. Divine design. God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. Genesis 1:31. The argument goes that in the original perfect creation, humanity was designed for incredible longevity, even potential immortality. Death was an intruder after the fall. Maybe 900 plus years was just how humans were meant to function. 2. The tree of life. Before Adam and Eve were banished from Eden, they had access to the tree of life. Genesis 3:22. Could eating from this tree have granted or sustained incredibly long life? Maybe its lingering effects or knowledge gained from it persisted for generations. 3. Vital power. Genesis 2:7 says God breathed the breath of life into Adam. Perhaps this initial divine spark was incredibly potent, and its potency diluted over generations. It's a clean explanation. The text says it, we believe it. The decline? A consequence of sin entering the world, the cumulative effects of the fall, and maybe the catastrophic environmental reset of the flood washing away whatever unique conditions existed. But it does leave our modern scientific mind shouting, but how biologically? Which leads us to theory time. Option B, the lost world, lost science hypothesis. Forget literal divine intervention every second. Maybe the pre-flood world was fundamentally different, allowing for super longevity through natural, if extraordinary, means. Cue the dramatic music. Do! Pre-flood paradise. Imagine a world with a vastly different atmosphere, maybe higher oxygen levels, or a protective water vapor canopy, Genesis 1:6-8, filtering harmful radiation. Less UV damage, slower cell decay, perfect growing conditions meaning super nutrient-rich food, think hyper salads. Pristine genetics. Adam and Eve were created perfect, zero genetic mutations. The argument goes that harmful mutations accumulated slowly over generations. By Methuselah's time, maybe they'd only built up to the equivalent of modern 40-year-olds. Telomeres, those protective caps on DNA, just didn't shorten as fast? Lost knowledge, superfoods. Did the ancients possess knowledge of incredible medicine, forgotten after the flood? Or was there some literal fountain of youth substance, a plant, mineral, or energy source accessible back then that vanished? Maybe Enoch found the ultimate smoothie recipe.
Ooh, this one's fun. It feels like uncovering a lost chapter of human potential. But it does require accepting some major geophysical changes and lost technologies we have zero evidence for outside the text. And it still begs the question, why did everyone back then have this potential, but no one since? Did Noah forget to pack the longevity seeds on the ark?
Theory time. Theory C takes a completely different angle. It's not about biology at all. Enter the numerical symbolism theory. What if these huge numbers aren't meant to be literal solar years? What if they're coded messages, symbolic representations, or based on a different calendar system? 1. Lunar or seasonal years. Some scholars suggest these numbers represent lunar months or seasons, not solar years. Divide Methuselah's 969 by 12 months, you get about 80.7 solar years. Plausible, but honestly a bit mundane, and it doesn't perfectly fit all the genealogies and events described. Also, Genesis consistently uses the same word, shene, for year throughout, usually meaning solar year. 2. Symbolic significance. This is fascinating. In ancient Near Eastern cultures, large numbers often symbolized importance, divine favor, or authority, not literal counting. Methuselah's 969 might be a code. 9 equals divine completeness, God. 6 equals humanity. Another 9 equals divine completeness. His life spanned the era from near perfection to the judgment of the flood. His name itself allegedly means, when he dies, it shall be sent, linking his death year to the flood year. Coincidence? Maybe not just a number. 3. Representing dynasties or clans. Could Methuselah lived 969 years actually mean the Methuselah clan or lineage persisted for 969 years? The number represents the duration of their prominence or influence, not one dude's birthday candles. This theory is appealing because it sidesteps the biological impossibility, as we understand it, and focuses on the theological and literary message Genesis might be conveying, the slow, tragic decline of humanity from an ideal state towards God's judgment at the flood. The numbers tell a story of God's patience and humanity's growing corruption. But it does feel a bit like saying, oh, they didn't really mean it, which might not satisfy the literal question.
Hold on. Plot twist alert. Remember Methuselah, our 969-year-old champion? Here's a mind-bender straight from the Genesis timeline. Genesis 5 tells us Methuselah was Noah's grandfather. Genesis 7:6 says the flood began when Noah was 600 years old. Now do the math. Methuselah died in the year 969 after his birth, which according to the timeline was the very same year the flood started. Genesis 5:27 simply says Methuselah lived 969 years and then he died. It doesn't say he died in the flood, just that year. Did he die peacefully right before the rains came? Was his death the final sign? Remember his name's meaning. When he dies, it shall be sent. Coincidence? Or chillingly precise storytelling? Boom!
Theory time. Okay, let's bring in the lab coats. What does modern science say about 900-year lifespans? Theory D, the scientific squint. Spoiler alert, they don't have a definitive answer either, but here's how they might try to explain it if they took the numbers literally. Hyper-slow aging. Imagine aging at 1/10 our current speed. Puberty at 150? Retirement at 750? Science fiction. We understand aging involves telomere shortening, cellular damage, free radicals, and accumulated mutations. A perfect storm of pristine genes, zero environmental toxins, no disease, and maybe some unknown biological mechanism slowing everything down might theoretically stretch a lifespan. But 900 years? Current biology says extremely improbable, bordering on impossible with known natural laws. Maximum theoretical human lifespan estimates hover around 120–150 based on known biology. Catastrophic reset, the flood. Science does acknowledge mass extinction events radically change environments. If the flood or a similar global catastrophe happened, it could have drastically altered atmosphere, radiation levels, food sources, and introduced new pathogens, explaining the sudden and steep decline in lifespans afterward, a literal world-changing event. The "we don't have a clue" camp. Honestly, many scientists would simply say the lifespans as recorded are not historically or biologically accurate in a literal sense. They might attribute them to ancient literary traditions, symbolic numbers, or copyist errors, though the consistency argues against simple errors. The how becomes a non-question because the fact isn't accepted as physical reality.
Science, based on observable evidence and current understanding, can't validate a 900-year human lifespan. Full stop. It pushes the conversation firmly back towards theology, ancient cultural context, or symbolism as the most likely explanations for the text as we have it.
Bible fact break. Let's visualize that incredible decline. We start sky high with the pre-flood patriarchs, all clocking in above 895 years, except Enoch, who had a different exit strategy. Then boom, the flood hits. Post-flood, Shem lives 600 years. Still incredible, but a 350-plus year drop from his ancestors. His son Arphaxad, 438 years, down another chunk. Fast forward a few generations to Eber, 464. Then Peleg, 239. Why so short?
Genesis 10:25 cryptically says, "In his days the earth was divided." More mystery. By Terah, Abraham's dad, 205 years. Abraham, 175. Isaac, 180. Jacob, 147. Joseph, 110. Moses, 120. David, around 70. It's like watching a balloon slowly deflate over centuries. That sharp initial drop after the flood is the most dramatic shift, strongly suggesting something fundamental changed about the world or humanity's place in it at that point. So where does that leave us, fellow time travelers? We've explored the literal word, dreamed of lost worlds and forgotten sciences, cracked numerical codes, and peeked into modern labs. The truth about Methuselah's 969 candles? It remains one of Genesis' most captivating enigmas. Was it literal biology in a lost paradise? A profound theological symbol of God's long-suffering patience before judgment? A combination? Or something else entirely? Honestly, trying to fully reconcile it with our 21st century understanding might be like Methuselah trying to figure out TikTok. Some mysteries might simply stretch beyond our current grasp. And maybe that's okay. The text presents it. It invites wonder. It sparks conversation, just like we're having. Here's a fun thought to wrap up with. If you could live 900 years, would you even want to? Seriously, imagine the history you'd witness, the technological leaps, but also the loss you'd experience over and over. Would boredom set in after century 3? Would you keep up with the slang? Would the sheer weight of time change what it means to be human? Deep thought.